I want to move to another topic, which is very timely this week, and that's about Supreme Court hearing. So we heard from Judge Jackson that basically she gave a questionnaire response to the Senate Judiciary Committee about a lecture that she gave in 2015. And she said, this is her own words, she said that I try to convince my students that sentencing, when she's talking about fairness in sentencing, it's not only interesting on an intellectual level, but she said it melds together lots of disciplines. One of the disciplines she included was critical race theory. So she's basically praising the act of judging and administering the law as being able to incorporate critical race theory. So to me, that was a huge red flag. I would vote against her. Do you think that is very troubling to you to hear this potential nominee who could be elevated to the highest court in the land, that she's embracing, I think, such a racist approach?
Well, I saw the part of the hearings. When I saw the hearings, she didn't even really seem to care or even be able to define what critical race theory was. So I think this is just, again, stuff being stirred up on the right. My overall theory on this is, look, you've heard what I said about my thoughts on critical race theory. I don't think it's a good thing, but I also think it's being used as a political cudgel. And I think there's been a few isolated examples that have been rolled out, and I will say, unfortunately, effectively as something that's going on nationally. And yes, there are some teachers here and there. There's some curricula here and there that isn't what it should be. But overall, I think it's blown way out of proportion. But having said that, that to me, when you pick through someone who's done so many cases, you're always going to be able to find stuff. Ted Cruz with his ridiculous chart about under sentencing for child pornography cases, where I think people with an objective mind would say that she took a look at the evidence and all the factors there and gave what were essentially fair sentences. But let's take a step back and look at the macro on this. And I think it's always good to look at it when it comes to the courts, through what Mitch McConnell thinks. This is a low stakes thing, right? It's a liberal replacing a liberal. It's not going to affect the makeup of the court at all. And I also believe, frankly, that it was a mistake, just like you shouldn't say, I'm going to pick a woman vice president. And then when you pick someone, people say, oh, she's the best woman. Was she the best candidate? You shouldn't say, oh, I'm going to pick a black woman. And then they'll say, oh, well, I know she was the best black woman because she was the best candidate. Now, Ketanji Jackson-Brown is very qualified. She should get through. The Supreme Court, before Mitch McConnell broke it, like he's broke so many other things in Washington, used to be one of the few bipartisan processes left, where if you look even at Sotomayor and Kagan, they got, I think, well over 60 votes. And it used to be, if a judge was qualified, it didn't matter if they were conservative from Republicans or Democratic or liberal from Democratic, they would get appointed and they would get confirmed. So that's not the case anymore. And then, you also have hucksters like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and Marsha Blackburn, who is one of the most unworthy senators I've ever seen. But that's a whole nother issue. But anyway, I think this is a low stakes thing. I think she'll get confirmed relatively easily. I think she'll probably have 53 or 54 votes in the end. Any additional thoughts?
Well, the Wall Street Journal, I said something very interesting about showing that the stakes could change on a dime in terms of what could happen, by the sickness of Clarence Thomas. And thank God it seems that he's going to be healthy. But, the oldest justices now are 73 and 71. They're both conservative. And so you don't know what might happen. And it seems that Judge Jackson is actually very far left to the place of who she's replacing, Justice Breyer. And I think there's a reason why very hard left groups are embracing for her instead of someone like Michelle Childs, who I would have nominated if I were, the candidate that Joe Biden promised us to be. And the fact that, the South Carolina congressman who basically saved Joe Biden's career was really asking to put up her, and Biden just gave him the back of his hand, I think is really offensive, and unfortunate, but not surprising, because Joe Biden keeps putting up hard left people like, Saul Omarova, an actual Marxist, to be the comptroller of the currency.
Well, let's not talk about people who aren't qualified getting jobs in administrations after Trump. Oh my God.
I'm just saying ideologically, like hard left people that were supposed to be, Joe Biden promised us a steady hand, moderate left. What he's given us is far left, hard left people who don't represent where the center of America is. And that's
Well,
what I find upsetting about Judge
first of
Jackson.
all, I look, and I'm, unlike you, I always criticize both sides, and I believe, first of all, that this is being done on both sides. I think it's sometimes worse. At least the people on the left, if they may be very liberal, but they're qualified. You had people that Trump put up that were hucksters that made donations that were totally unqualified, and some of them were very radical as well. And the only other thing I would say to wrap up is that, in all fairness, and I know both Trump and Reagan said they would appoint a woman, but typically you're not allowed to pre-qualify someone by race or gender. And I just wonder what would ever happen if someone said, I'm going to appoint a white man to the Supreme Court. Do you think there'd be any reaction? Anyway, so
I agree.